Hello, my name is Frank McGinity. I live here in Riven Rock, or like some of my neighbors call it, Riven Rock Park. I'd like to tell you something about how the property came together and how the previous owner, a well-known Stanley McCormick, came about acquiring it. I'd start out that an Owen Stafford, way back in 1877, bought this property. He originally bought 34 acres and later on acquired additional property to bring it up to 87 acres. And he developed the property with lemon groves and orange groves, avocados, and many fruit trees throughout. In 1896, the McCormick family, specifically Stanley McCormick, acquired the property and named it Riven Rock. And the reason he came up with that name, he saw an oak tree growing out of a rock. And that's where he came up with the term Riven Rock. Stanley went to Princeton, was on the debating team and tennis team. He also graduated cum laude from Princeton. 6'4", he was a very imposing figure. When he was approximately 28, he married Catherine Dexter McCormick, who had quite a history of her own right. She was a socialite out of Chicago and the second female graduate from MIT. Eventually she went on to become the backer of Margaret Sanger and the birth control pill. She had the technical ability and had the finances for that pill. So it was a dynamic couple, Catherine Dexter McCormick and Stanley McCormick. Unfortunately, when Stanley was 28, he was stricken with schizophrenia, and that required him to be confined here to Riven Rock, the 87 acres, for the rest of his life. Stanley had a particular type of schizophrenia. They had to be very careful that he wasn't in the company of women. In fact, his wife, Catherine Dexter McCormick, for at least 20 years, could not be with her husband. She would observe him by binoculars from afar. And that was a sad story.
Even in the sorrow of her marriage to Stanley, she was a most productive woman. She had a wonderful life on her own as far as projects that she undertook.
There was a board that would oversee Stanley's care. It's made up of 3 of the family members. And they would get reports weekly or monthly about just how Stanley was doing. In 1929, Catherine Dexter McCormick challenged the board. She didn't like the care that Stanley was getting from his psychiatrist. So that one of the big cases in Santa Barbara in 1929 went on and on, because here was this very rich person, recluse, in Riven Rock, and people were fighting over his care. Stanley had 2 male nurses around the clock, and they would take him around town and always be with him. In fact, it was interesting. They'd dress Stanley, he'd always have a tie and jacket, and they'd grab him by his cuffs as it went through the town or wherever they went. And people might not know there was anything wrong, but he was seriously ill. He was athletic, and occasionally he would escape. And so the male nurses would have to run after him and get him back. So you had to have eternal vigilance with him, even though he did have his good days. Stanley had his own in-house psychiatrist. Dr. Hamilton was the first, but he was followed by a number of other psychiatrists. And Dr. Hamilton was the first to develop a primate lab here at Riven Rock. And they were all trying to find a cure for Stanley. Besides his in-house psychiatrist, Stanley actually had a staff of close to 80 people. They would maintain the 87 acres. They built these beautiful stone walls throughout Riven Rock. They built the 7 historical bridges that you'll see in Riven Rock. It's an interesting story about Stanley in this room. He used to have his own personal orchestra. It was 5 pieces. And I've spoken to one of the people that were in that orchestra. And he said when Stanley had a particularly bad day, he'd come in, listen to the music, and then in the second part of the program, he might pull out a water pistol and start shooting at the orchestra. They all understood the situation and took it all in stride and continued playing the concert. This is the McCormick Theater House. It had a threefold purpose here. First, it housed Stanley's psychiatrist. Second, it was the office for this huge estate, 87 acres. And third, it represented an entertainment facility for Stanley. 3 times a week, first-line movies would be sent up here for Stanley's viewing pleasure. They were silent movies, of course, during the 20s, and then later on, the talkie movies. If you look on the walls here, we have a material called vermiculite. And vermiculite absorbs sound and gives it a certain quality of sound throughout this theater. Some of the leading mezzo-sopranos in the country would come in here and sing. This is a recent addition to the improvement program we've had for the house. You'll notice the granite matches out in the kitchen. And originally this was a closet. And when we went in to tear it apart and dig it out and get it set for this bar, we discovered there was a shower pan in this closet, and found out later on that that was probably a shower for Stanley, and of course helped him calm him down. It's somewhat ironic, because we now come back from a hard day at work, maybe have a drink, and it helps calm us down. And Stanley 40 years ago used the same area and had a shower and calmed him down. Originally, that was a solid wall to my left, and because it was a self-contained theater that way. But later on, when it was converted to a house, they put in a fireplace, and the fireplace is unique in the sense that it has 2 chimneys and a big picture window in the middle of the fireplace. So the smoke goes up either side of the fireplace. I've seen engineers in here, they're always looking around, trying to figure out how this works.
On the stonework around Riven Rock, take note of the wonderful bush hammering that is on many of the stone gate areas, and we've replicated it on the fireplace in the theater room now, and also on our front steps there is bush hammering done, so we're not touching any of that. You might want to see some pieces of the grill work that pieces are on each window, especially along the front of the house. We have approximately, I think, 30 sections of this old, wonderfully designed grill work, which has been restored and new copper screening put in.
But the grill work was for Stanley to keep him in, to keep him safe. And the grill work also has turned out to be a very nice artistic feature to the house. The water used to come in here from the streams for the potable water for all the houses here in Riven Rock. But when we found out there was too much fluoride in the water, we shut it down. But our agricultural water comes off Cold Springs Creek and goes into a 1 million gallon reservoir. And it supplies all the 34 homes here in Riven Rock. It's a wonderful system, and it was a system originally set up by Stanley McCormick. The story of the Tower Library started about 7 years ago. I'm on the executive council of the American Irish Historical Society in New York. The only branch of the society is located out here in Santa Barbara. About 7 years ago, the President General of the Society came out and stayed with me. And he was looking at this water tower and he said, "Gee, that looks like the Martello Tower in Ireland. You really should do something about that and it could become a good library." I came in here and removed the filtration equipment that was in this building and had these bookcases built. The tower has been very interesting for us because A, we can keep a number of the Irish volumes that have been sent to us by New York. Also, we have an annual recorder that we keep here. And I know a number of times, for example, my wife Sheila would come up here and do her research, because right here we have close to 600 volumes. So it's a very effective research library if you're interested in Irish history and literature. Stanley McCormick died in 1947, a very wealthy man. He's worth about $50 million. And during the Depression years, he's worth about $40 million. Probably made him one of the wealthiest men in the country. Now his wealth also allowed him to build a beautiful Riven Rock Park and also maintain it, $250,000 a year. His wealth came from his shares in International Harvester, which in turn came from the invention of the reaper by his father, Cyrus McCormick. For centuries, grain had been harvested with strong arms, an aching back, and some form of a long knife or a sickle. The McCormick reaper, designed and built at Walnut Grove near Steele's Tavern in Virginia, harvested 5 times faster than any previous method, with a fraction of the physical effort. Acceptance of the McCormick reaper spread, slowly at first, but then at a pace that quickly outstripped his ability to produce the machines at the Walnut Grove blacksmith shop. In 1847, he moved to Chicago to serve the vast prairie grain fields of the Midwest. The McCormick's Virginia Reaper hastened westward expansion of the United States, and this expansion produced new markets for the Reaper. In 1851, the Reaper won the highest award of the day, the gold medal at London's Crystal Palace exhibition, and Cyrus McCormick became a world celebrity. McCormick's success was partly due to his mechanical inventiveness, but he also was a pioneer in business techniques, easy credit to enable farmers to pay for machines from increased harvests, written performance guarantees, and advertising to convince farmers to buy his reaper. He helped make farmers mechanically minded and willing to try new ideas. That willingness, in turn, made the American farmer the most efficient in the world. The reaper and other farm machines, which came from the McCormick Company and subsequent companies, of course, International Harvester and now Tenneco's J.I. Case affiliate, allowed fewer and fewer people to produce more and more food and fiber. In the process, our society was transformed. Instead of 90% of the population farming to meet the nation's needs, as was the case in 1831, today fewer than 2% of the U.S. population are directly involved in farming. Freed from the soil, people turn their energies to industry, science, arts, and other ways to improve the quality of life in this country and around the world. So, where we're thanking today Stanley McCormick, let's also thank Cyrus McCormick. Stanley died in 1947 of pneumonia, and it's said that his caregivers cried for a week after he died. And I have met a number of people throughout Santa Barbara who knew him, also would come to the theater and watch movies with their children, because Stanley would share that. There was a book written recently by T.C. Boyle on Riven Rock, It was a harsh portrayal of Stanley, and I asked T.C. Boyle about his approach. He said, look, I'm writing a novel, and I took a particular slant on it. I wasn't writing a biography of him. But Stanley had a lot of redeeming features. He kept a number of people employed during the Depression, built this beautiful park, and with his big fortune, he contributed that through the years over to charity. Many of the art museum and many of the other nonprofit organizations here in Santa Barbara has gained from his largesse. And certainly us, as residents here in the Riven Rock Park, we have a marvelous legacy from Stanley. In closing, I'd like to say that we've always enjoyed sharing this theater with many organizations in Santa Barbara. As mentioned, we've had lectures, we've had previews, we've had singing, and we've had orchestras here. And we look forward to sharing it in the future because it's a heritage for us, it's a heritage for the community as well. Thank you for joining me and sharing in the beauty of this Riven Rock Park. And thank you, Stanley, for your legacy. Hope to see you again.